just got back from the Castle Chess Camp in Atlanta, and it is easily my favorite week of chess in the year, as I've been involved with this camp for 16 years, first as a student, then a counselor, then an instructor, and now as a board member. And I wanted to highlight a few games from the weekend tournament from some of our winners, Grandmaster Becerra and Grandmaster Lenderman. We have their face-off in the first game we're going to look at in this series. And I always like to analyze games from players that are a good bit stronger than I am and see how they handle weekend tournaments. Julio has the black pieces here, and he is a half point up on the field. So Lenderman is clearly looking to win with white in order to leapfrog into first place. So the stage is set. Let's go ahead and dive right into the game. So Lenderman goes with this solid fianchetto variation, which if you followed the U.S. Championship, you've definitely seen Lenderman do this before. He had a clutch game, well, Caruana had a clutch game, I should say, in their U.S. Championship face-off. And in that game, it also featured a King's Indian, and Caruana went for c6, followed by bishop f5. And that's a line that I play quite frequently with black in this position as well. There are a number of different choices, from the classical approach with knight bd7 and e5 to more of the Panos type stuff with knight c6, rook b8, a6, and eventually b5. So black has a number of options here. And I know in the past, Julio has a number of games in the database where he goes for c6, followed by a queen a5 or queen b6 plan. But back when he was playing it, maybe 10 years ago, black was fine, but currently I don't think black's doing too hot in those lines anymore. So I find it interesting because his opening choice here, it's got a little bit of a surprise value, and it's good for a game. It's not good for doing this over and over. So, big fan. Bishop f5 immediately. And as a lifelong player of both sides of this position, this one kind of took me aback. So I hadn't seen it, because it is 9th choice in the database, and it's been played less than 200 times. And there are a number of interesting moves here. I think Lenderman chose the most direct route against it with the immediate knight h4, putting the question to the bishop. And it should be noted, if castles, it gives black the opportunity to transpose back into, with c6, that Lenderman Caruana game. But black should take the opportunity to play knight e4 here with a dynamic game. Second to knight h4, I really like queen b3, putting pressure, the space left behind, on b7. You ignore it with knight c6, and after queen takes, knight a5, you get this really interesting and dynamic game. Queen b4 was played, and we're following a game between Ippolito and Yip from 2020. I imagine this was a Title Tuesday game, as it's labeled chess.com. But there was kind of a potential repetition here. Let's say queen a6. But, like I said, interesting overall line. But knight h4 immediately puts the question to the bishop, and you need to go back. You don't want to lose the bishop pair, and you don't want to lose the b7 pawn, followed by the rook on a8. So castles, c6. And it's interesting because both sides have kind of wasted a tempo here. The bishop came out and came back, but also the knight came out and is going to need to come back. Since the knight didn't come back immediately here, e4, e5, and this is not typically available with the knight on f3 due to obvious reasons. So the knight comes back, and here we're at a critical moment in the position already. And I feel like this was more so Julio just trying to get a position rather than this being some deep, intricate preparation. When you surprise your opponent, it's you against them. And that's kind of what we want in these types of situations where Lenderman's clearly a very active and tough GM, so you know anything that he doesn't. You can get him out of comfort zone. You have a better shot. But this move by Julio definitely, the engine doesn't favor it, I'll say. The eval changes tremendously as c5 is played, locking up the position. And this is roughly a pawn and a half or so edge. So it's a good question here. If you were to pause your video and try to figure out optimal play, what would you do with black here? All right. Now, after taking a look at the position, of course, with the silicone monster assisting and the database, I'm a big fan of capturing on d5. And because the e-pawn only has a single tether with a knight, b5 seems like the best route at active counterplay with a dynamic and interesting game. White, of course, does carry a tiny amount of edge due to that first move, but I think this is the type of position you're playing for if you're a King's Indian player. Okay, so we get back to the main game. h3, and you really don't want to part with the bishop pair as you need it for active play later. And why bishop d7? Well, we'll see soon, because when the center is locked, the breaks are what you look for counterplay. And f5 could be a potential issue to try to play for, the typical King's Indian break, as some of these lines, if you allow knight g5, knight e6, you're just getting hammered. So the other break in the position is with b5. So this bishop is already eyeing the potential b5 break square. Knight e1, knight a6, no other place to put the knight. Queen e8, and then b5, the only active plan. And here, bishop e3. And I feel like black should be looking for key squares here. Deviating from the main game, I would likely go rook b8, followed by c4, where you're eyeing the potential use of c5. This knight could also come to d7 in some lines, and you just have a bit of everything going and the potential of using those two squares. But after bishop e3, knight c7 was played, and now white seizes the initiative as that knight on d3 is excellent with b4. Grab, grab. There goes the bishop pair in the open position, and knight d7. At this point, white should be winning with accurate play, but it is still not a trivial position to play. And it's just doing a piece comparison here. The remaining bishop is kind of locked out. It is a bad bishop because the pawns are stuck on those center squares. Your natural break with f5, you're not in a hurry to open up the position because that's going to do nothing but benefit white's bishop pair. And currently the black knights do not have good post squares. So pretty much all of white's pieces are better than their counterparts, which is why you have that indicator that white should definitively be better and on the verge of winning. Knight c6, hopping into that very, very good square. And hard to do much here other than go after it. So f5, let's get it. I would probably recommend taking and then go a4, as black's pieces are running out of squares, and this looks pretty solid. Queen d3 was played in the main game, and this cut a good amount of edge, as it gives time for black to consolidate a little bit here. Bishop takes. This gets rid of the bishop pair. And this is another critical moment, because at this point, the wrong decision is made by black, and it should cost black the game. Which capture do you make and why? Right, in the main game, f takes e4 was played. But I feel like e takes d4 is the better route. And white does have a big edge here at +2, but much like we'll see in the main game, everything rests with the d-pawn for getting counterplay. F takes e4 was played, and after e takes d, check. And this is arguably the last critical moment, because if white handles this position properly, it is 100% winning. I want to say the engine gave like a +4 evaluation here. But it's never trivial when playing tough games, and probably at this point, one or both players are in time trouble. So can't be too tough on them with a 5-second delay when you're used to playing with 30-second increment and whatnot. So in the main game, Lenderman played rook ae1 and gives away nearly all of the winning edge. It goes from +4 down to like 0.75. Queen takes d6 is the critical move. And after bishop f8, queen e6. And I love how the engine just reroutes the queen to the queening square. You've nabbed a pawn, you've improved the position, and you said, okay, your only chance is to beat me with the passer. Well, your passer's not going anywhere because my queen is not only sitting on the queening square, but is eyeing the push. So this should be a pretty straightforward mop-up job by white. But the game continues, and as spicy as it can be. Rook ae1, queen f8. Making the choice to sack the exchange. And now black has got some breathing room. The bishop on g7 doesn't seem that bad. And all hope in counterplay lies with the passer. a5. And this makes sense because you're just getting the pawn off of the attack of the knight. Probably more to the point was rook fe1, where you force the trade of the last rook in the position. And this seems like a really... It's an uphill battle for black, because it's not easy to see how black is going to improve the position, but white's king can easily come in here, and I feel like this should objectively be winning. But again, players are probably in time trouble. a5, d3. Hitting the a pawn and again eyeing the path. Rook b6. And don't be in too much of a hurry here, as this is complicated but still not over. Rook d8 was played in the main game, and after bishop f3, a5. And if you were going to trade rooks, clearly it would have been better earlier, like the line that we saw, because basically black got the same thing, except he's more coordinated here. And after king f6, a draw was agreed, and this is the first time in the game that black has some pull and some winning chances. And I can definitely understand Julio's point in taking a draw here, because all game it's been suffering, and you're a half point up with black against the main competition, the other GM that is in the event. Yeah, draw's a good choice here. So hopefully you enjoyed this game. Tune in, as we'll be doing in the next game, Julio's best win of the event, and it's quite clean. So looking forward to that.